Beautiful. Fits I think with the theme, doesn't it? Yeah. So we'll see if the next person can find where I hid the microphone. Good morning.
Good morning.
So I'd like you to just take a brief moment and bring your attention inside and just notice what's present. And I'd like you to open your eyes and pay attention around you and see what's present. Because whatever that is, whatever's present in you right now, and whatever's present here right now, that's where we start. The only place we can start. And we're always trying to start somewhere else. We try to start someplace in the past where things were better, or we think they were. We try to start someplace in the future where we think things are going to be better. We try to start someplace where we're not really there, because if we're feeling like in not such a good place, we don't want to feel like we're in that place, so we're going to pretend like we're not in that place. You can't start pretending you're someplace other than where you are. You start where you are, good or bad. So welcome here.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I want to talk to you about something today that personally I have never heard spoken of in any church except this one on rare occasions. That doesn't mean no churches have ever talked about it, but I've never been in a church where it's been talked about. And that is the most important day of the year. Now, the most important day of the year might mean different things to you than it does to me. In one sense, today is always the most important day of the year because that's when we're alive. But in another sense, in terms of the calendar year, what's the most holy, most important, significant day of the year? And we could come up with lots of things: birthdays, Christmas, Easter, Hanukkah, you name it. In the tradition of Jesus, in the Yeshua tradition, the most important day of the year is coming up this Thursday. It was called Yom Kippur, and it means the Day of Atonement. And it was the most significant, spiritually significant day of the entire Jewish year. And the really sad thing to me is that not only do I not know any Christian churches that celebrate it, I hardly know any Christians that even know about it. That's a gigantic loss to Christianity. Thank you. Yeah. In many ways, there is so much in the tradition that Yeshua grew up in and taught within and lived within that we now don't know, that it's a huge loss. And conversely, because of what the later church made Jesus into, it was unacceptable to Jews, that he was the one and only Son of God and nobody else was, and the only way to ever have a connection with the Father was to believe in Jesus as your Savior. That was not acceptable to Jews. And because of that, they know nothing about him, which is a huge loss to them. So, in an effort to make a little bit of amends for that, I'm going to try to talk to you about him and their tradition today, and the Yom Kippur tradition, which is the Day of Atonement. Now, in modern times, because the word in Hebrew is not an English word, it's Kippur, but in English, atonement can be broken down into at-one-ment. So a lot of kind of new cool people talk about it being a day of at-one-ment, but I'm not a real cool guy, so I'm not going to talk about that. But that's true too. That's an interesting way of looking at it, and it's also true. I'm going to start just briefly to let you know, because it's been an important day to me for a long time, and I actually looked up atonement in a dictionary because I'm a Bible dictionary guy. I'm old school. I actually like books I can hold in my hand. I actually like looking up the origins of things versus what people now tell me they meant, which usually when I look up the origins is nothing at all like what they tell me they meant. So I like to look up the origins of things. But in the dictionary, there's a lot of definitions of atonement. And the first one in Webster's dictionary is to restore to friendship. Don't you think that's an interesting one? If you're thinking about making atonement with God or with somebody else, it's to restore to friendship. So I really like that one. Now, in Hebrew, there's another word that if you've come to any of Michael and my classes, you'll hear it's called tikkun. And tikkun means mending or fixing or healing or making amends. It can actually also mean sewing, like sewing together something. So the idea of making amends is an important thing. And so I want to talk with you about that today. That's what Yom Kippur is about. That's why it's the most important day of the year. It goes back to, I'll tell you kind of the origins of it and how it's understood now and ways that you can work with it if you want to this week, because it is this week. We are right now, whether you know it or not, in what the Jewish tradition has called for thousands of years the High Holy Days. We just finished the month of Elul, and in the month of Elul, the psalm that we're supposed to read every day and contemplate is the one that was just read up here, Psalm 27. Isn't that an interesting coincidence? Because I don't think that was planned. So, and now we have had Rosh Hashanah. Rosh means head, Shana means year, it means head of the year, it means the new year. The Jewish New Year has just started, just recently. And on Thursday will be 10 days after that New Year started. That's October the 2nd in our calendar, I believe, but it's this Thursday. And that's Yom Kippur, called the Day of Atonement. So there's 10 days between the beginning of the New Year in Judaism and the day where we try to make peace with God and each other, called the Day of Atonement. So first of all, Rosh Hashanah. The first Rosh Hashanah, the first day of the year, was in the very first sentence of the book of Genesis when everything started. That was the beginning in the Jewish and Christian tradition. So that was actually the first Rosh Hashanah. And if you read, and you probably haven't for a while, but if you read the first chapter of Genesis, which is the first creation story, you'll find that there are 10 emanations from God that bring everything into existence. Let there be light, and there was light. Let there be all of those. So there are 10 of those. There are 10 days between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. For those of you who study anything mystical in Judaism, like the Kabbalah, or you've ever even just seen a depiction of the Tree of Life and went, oh, that looks interesting, or you've ever looked at Michael's necklace, and you see the Tree of Life depiction, those things are called Sephirot, and there are, guess how many of them? 10. Wanda just held up her hand. If you hold up both of them, how many you got? 10. Probably you got 10 toes. You know, maybe not, but you probably do. 10. 10 is like everywhere. So 10 days between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. How many commandments? There you go, 10. Okay. So, now after that, when Rosh Hashanah actually started as a Jewish tradition, was by Moses. And when he first came down from the mountain, he brought a set of stone tablets that had the so-called commandments, although in Hebrew they're just called the sayings. They're not called commandments. They're called the 10 sayings because they weren't commandments. They were guidelines. And when he brought them down from the mountain after 40 days of communing with Hashem, communing with the boundlessness of God, he came down and discovered that his own brother and his whole group of people had now made a golden calf like they had in Egypt and were bowing down and worshiping the golden idol. I mean, 40 days, and the entire thing he taught was thrown out the window, and they went back to what was more familiar to them. Well, we know how to worship this. How do we worship a God we can't see? How do we worship a God we don't feel? How do we worship a God we can't hear? There's a calf. I can touch it. I can see it. I can do that. And while that sounds kind of weird, some people are like that still. Well, I can't see him. He doesn't talk to me. So how do I know if such things are real? which is a good question, actually. There is a way to know that, but it's not through our physical senses, because God is spirit, not body. So this was the first time that, and Moses was a little steamed, if you read the story, about that. It reminds me of an old joke a Christian friend of mine told me. He said they were having a discussion in his church one day, and that somebody said, you know, Jesus is coming back for real. He's coming back this week. He just told me. And everybody was just like, really? And he said, yeah. And they went, that's great news. And he said, yeah, I know, but the bad news is he is really ticked off. So Moses was really upset with these people. And after the initial venting of his hostility and his anger, he went back up the mountain to commune with God again and came back down with a second set of commandments for a second chance. Second chances are really important in Judaism. Frankly, they're pretty important to me too, because I screw up sometimes. So that was the first atoning practice of the Jewish people, was when he brought the second set of tablets down and they felt forgiven for having gone back into idolatry again. And today, I doubt if any of you have a golden calf at home that you worship when you get there, but I would be willing to bet that there are some things you make idols of in your life, because I know I do. And the reality, from the biblical standpoint, is anything that we put more importance on than God is an idol. Anything we put more importance on than God is an idol. And for many of us, I mean, we're probably thinking things like greed or materialism or things or whatever. But what about fear? How often do you make that more important than God? How often is fear your idol? Because if God's really love, then really another way of saying what I just said is, if you make anything more important than love, then that thing becomes an idol. And then it becomes, and the fact that you've made it important is not a bad thing. The fact that you make it so important that you begin to not be aware of the importance of love or the Spirit of God in your life, that becomes the problem. It becomes an impediment to that. And you get caught up in what you're attached to and fixated on, and miss what's actually going on, which is why in the beginning I just said, what's happening in here? What's happening out here? Pay attention. If our attention is really present, we're not getting caught up in all those other things. Okay, so the other big thing about Rosh Hashanah is something called forgiveness. And forgiveness is something we are all in favor of until we have something we have to forgive. We're all in favor of people forgiving us. We're all in favor of the idea of forgiveness. And we're all in favor of having forgiven somebody. Oh, I forgave them. Oh, well, aren't I great? What about the person who just did this to you? And suddenly we're not so keen on forgiveness. And frankly, I mean, while we're joking about it now, when you are really hurt by somebody, it is difficult. It's not a joking matter then. It's hard. And sometimes the truth is, I can't do it. Sometimes it takes time for me to get to there. Here's the incident, here's the wound, here's the pain, and the forgiveness is not right there. I'd like to say it was, and sometimes it is. But sometimes it is not. And even when I want to, I can think forgiving, but I'm not forgiving. And at some point, finally, I get to forgiveness. And how I know when I get to it is, it lets go of me. And it doesn't become something I carry anymore. And it doesn't change my behavior toward the world or somebody in it anymore. So that's what Rosh Hashanah leads up to on this 10th day as Yom Kippur, is it is a day that is specifically set aside at least once a year that the entire community practices asking for forgiveness. Most of us are more givers than receivers in this room, and most of us are much more comfortable being givers than receivers. But in Rosh Hashanah, you have to ask for something, and that is you have to ask to be forgiven. Much harder than forgiving, actually, for most of us. And there's a lot of discussion in newer, more contemplative spiritual movements about the fact that God doesn't really need to forgive us because God doesn't judge us and hold anything against us. There is a truth in that. But there's another truth that's unspoken, and that is, it may well be that God doesn't hold anything against you, and God doesn't need to forgive you, but you need to feel forgiven. Don't you? Because when you don't, you're broken. Is that not true? If somebody you love, just at a human level, your spouse, your child, your best friend, somebody you really love is really upset with you, really been hurt by you, really angry at you, really disappointed in you. You know, one of the worst things my dad ever said, most painful things my dad ever said to me was not yelling at me, was not getting mad at me about stuff. It's when he would say to me very quietly, "Son, I'm disappointed in you." Man, I would have done anything to undo that. And then I did. I stopped behaving that way. When we don't feel forgiven, there is a brokenness inside us. And the at-one-ment that we're talking about, the Jewish tradition understood you can't experience oneness if you do not feel forgiven. And you cannot experience it if you're unwilling to extend forgiveness. You remain broken, not whole, and you remain holding something between you and God. We think we're holding something against this awful person who said this mean thing to us. And so we're creating a distance between that person and us. And we want that distance because we don't want them to say another mean thing to us and hurt us more. So it's a protective mechanism. But the problem is, where does God reside? In me and in them. So when I'm creating barriers between me and you, who else am I creating a barrier between me and? Right? Is that not so? So Yom Kippur is about freeing ourselves from the burden of unforgiven. Forgiving those people who have injured or wounded or scared or in some way caused us pain. Forgiving those people and letting that go. Now, to be really clear, one of the reasons that some people have trouble with forgiveness is because they believe that that means it's the same thing as approval. It's not approval. I can forgive somebody for something they've done, and what they did is still wrong, and I still don't like it that they did it, and I still hope to God they don't ever do it again, not only to me, but to anybody. Because causing people suffering is not Christ-like. That's not our nature. It is not our nature to hurt each other. I know we do it all the time, but that's not our, and a lot of times we do it unintentionally. That's a whole other talk. But the intentional hurting of somebody is not what the Divine Spirit does. It doesn't do that. So all of these things that are not forgiven, that we have not forgiven each other for, all the things we've not forgiven life for. You know, why wasn't I born rich and handsome? You know, that's, somebody screwed up here. I'm pretty sure I was supposed to be really rich and handsome. You know, why were you born short? Why are you fat? Why are you too skinny? Why are you stupid? Why are you no good at math? Why can't you play music? You know, whatever it is that you don't like about yourself, that's somebody's fault. Can't be yours. So, you know, who did this? And we're upset about that. Or just the fact that life isn't fair, or doesn't appear to be. That's not good. Well, that's God's fault, right? So we're mad at God. We have a lot of unconscious, unspoken things that we hold against God and each other. And in Yom Kippur, there's an opportunity to be honest about those and say, I don't want to carry these anymore. It's too heavy. Why do you wake up tired and sore? What are you carrying? Every day. Over and over and over and over. Where's your out? If we're carrying openness to love, if we're carrying being present with what is right now, then it's not so heavy. Then it's a much more buoyant experience and transcendent experience in moving through life. So this Yom Kippur is a day to actually extend forgiveness and ask for forgiveness. When we feel forgiven, there is a restoration that happens. The first restoration is a restoration of our energy. All the energy that has kept us tired and depressed and worn out is lifted. And now we're suddenly buoyant and energized and feel expansive and free. And when we feel forgiven, we are able to not hold back when we engage with one another, as opposed to all the walls we put up all the time to protect ourselves, because we haven't forgiven the things out there that hurt us, so we have to build walls to make sure that doesn't happen again, and then we wonder why we have distance between us. We have distance because of what we won't forgive. And that's one of the keys that Judaism understood. If you want to experience oneness and wholeness, you have to start working on letting go through the act of forgiveness. And you have to accept enough humility to ask for forgiveness for what you have screwed up. It takes some humility to do that. It's very hard for ego-centered, prideful people to ask you to forgive them. It's tough, because it takes humility to do that. So this focus on forgiveness is a training in how to live with humility and how to live open to love. That's really what it's an opportunity to do. So it's huge. I'm going to share a couple things from you from Jesus. The first one is, this is Matthew 5:23, and Jesus says, if you come to the altar to present your gift to God, and you remember something on the way there that you have against your brother, don't go to the altar. Here's Jesus telling you not to go worship at the altar. What does he tell you to do? Go to your brother. Make amends. Then come to the altar. So that's a really important teaching. The prayer that we now call the Lord's Prayer, or Our Father, was a sample, a model, when his disciples asked him how we should be praying. He said, well, like this. What he did not say was, memorize these exact words and say it just like this for the next 3,000 years. He didn't say that. He said, do it like this. It should have these elements in it. It should have these feelings and these attitudes in it. And one of them says, Father, forgive us our trespasses. There's forgiveness again. But that's not the end of the sentence. What's the end of the sentence? As we forgive others. It's conditional. If we want to be forgiven, this is a really difficult thing for a lot of people to get. If we want to actually be forgiven and feel forgiven, we can't until we forgive. Not because God won't forgive us, but because we can't open to being forgiven until we open. And if we open, we're willing to forgive too. They go together. And that was recognized back then. I'll tell you one more thing. This is from John, the Apostle John. It's in first letter of John 4:20. And this is a pretty dramatic statement, by the way, biblically speaking. You don't have a lot of real direct statements in the Bible. There's more innuendo and hints. And this is really direct. This is John. If someone says to you, I love God, and yet he hates his brother or sister, he is a liar. Not he's mistaken, not he's confused. He is a liar. That's a pretty radical thing to say. So I'm going to add something to that in my lack of humility. I think a corollary to that is if you are unwilling to forgive, don't pretend you love. Because you haven't gotten there yet. Have you ever loved anybody? Seriously, you don't have to answer this and you don't have to raise your hands. Well, you don't have to tell me. You do need to answer it, but not to me. Have you ever loved anybody that you haven't let down? Have you ever loved anybody who hasn't disappointed you? Have you ever loved anybody who hasn't made a mistake in their relationship with you? If the answer to that is no, or even mostly no, then forgiveness is essential for you. It certainly is for me. So, moving on, here's another thing I'd like to say before I get caught up and don't get to the end here. When we talk about love, we often talk about love as a feeling. It's something that we feel. It's an emotion, but it's much deeper than just an emotion. It's less transient than an emotion. It's actually a spiritual energy. It's not an emotion. It's a spiritual energy. And we tend to talk about it that way, like I love so-and-so, or I love you, or I love this church. And that's all wonderful. But there's another component to that that we often miss, and that is that love is actually spirit in action. There's an action component to love. At one of the classes Michael and I did on Saturday a while back, we were reading from the letter of James, who was the brother of Jesus. And in it, he basically, I'm paraphrasing because I don't have it in front of me, but he basically says, if you come upon somebody who's cold, somebody who's hungry, somebody who needs something, and you say to them, don't worry, brother, I'll pray for you, and then you walk away, James says, you know what you've done for them? Nothing. Kind of like the liar statement. Nothing. Does that mean it's bad to pray for them? No. What it means is when someone is in front of you and you can help them and don't, and use prayer as an excuse to not take action, then that love is not love because it's not spirit in active expression. So here's my thought. We're taught here in this church and in the Bible and in the teachings and life of Yeshua that God is spirit and that God is love. Therefore, if God is spirit and God is love, then spirit is love. Yeah? So we kind of get that, I think. We kind of get that. So if that's really true, then our spiritual responsibility, our main spiritual responsibility, is not acquiring knowledge about God. It's not that. It is not attending places of worship. It's not that. It's not even teaching people about God. Not that either. If God is spirit and God is love and spirit is love, then it's also not about developing personal power to manifest things the way we want them in our lives. It's not about that either. What our spiritual responsibility is to care for the people in our lives. That's it. It's not how much you know about God or philosophy or religion or unity principles. It's not any of that. Does all of that help? Of course it does. That's why we do all this. But is that the primary responsibility you have with your life spiritually? No. You could come to this church every Sunday from now until you die and believe what you hear here. And treat your husband or wife or child as if they didn't matter. And you would have missed the whole point. Isn't that true? And isn't one of the things you like about being at this church that you do, in fact, at least most often, feel like you're welcome and cared for here? And that at least somebody here loves you? Do you think that Jesus made the impact he made on the world because of his profound philosophy, because he said things that no other teacher or philosopher had ever said in the whole history of the world. Think that's true? Because it's not. He actually didn't say anything new in that regard. Do you think when people met Yeshua, when somebody is struggling with blindness, when somebody's struggling with their family crisis, when somebody's struggling with illness, when somebody's struggling with the Roman occupation and how cruel they are, when they're separated from their family, when somebody is really hurting and they meet Yeshua and he spends some time with them, do you think they walk away and went, wow, I learned some really interesting things. Do you know that the history of Moses began when, do you think they got a history lesson from him? Do you think they went away thinking, wow, that's a really profound moral philosophy. I'm going to try to embody that in the way I live each day? Or do you think they felt loved and that changed everything? It changed how they felt about themselves, how they felt about God, and they were healed. And every time they were healed, does Jesus even once say, I did it? No. Not even once. And when people said to him, thank you for healing me, what did he say? It wasn't me. It was what? Your faith that did it. Your faith in what? In the Father, who is what? The Spirit of love. That's what heals. It's not magic. It's not some special mumbo-jumbo or some special amulet or some special chant or some special prayer. It's actual, real love. Not the idea of love, not a nice notion of love. Actual, real love being expressed person to person. Yom Kippur is a time to recognize that we will not experience the love we want, and we will not enter into the oneness that we seek until we feel forgiven and are willing to forgive. And so if there's anything at all in your life that you feel like isn't done yet as far as being resolved with forgiveness, Thursday is a chance to bring that to completion and be done with it. However old it is, be done with it. Move into the new year free of that. Let go. So, I'm going to mention just briefly, and then I'm going to do a little song for you. This Thursday at Unity, at 7 o'clock, there is going to be a special Yom Kippur program that I'm leading. And it will include a very, very ancient meditation practice also about coming to terms with these things and moving past them. You're welcome to participate in that if you like. If you do want to come and you can let us know, that would be great, because we have a little service that we go through together and some readings. And so if you can come without letting us know, but you won't get a book to follow along what we're doing because we won't have printed one for you. But if you let us know, then you will have one. So I hope you can join us. I hope some of you can join us. The last piece is that this is an historical piece, but it applies to how we work still today. On Yom Kippur, they had a temple in those days, and the temple had different sections to the temple. There was a public section to the temple. There was a priest-only section to the temple. Then there was something called the Holy of Holies. It was the innermost, most secluded part of the temple. And do you know who could go into the Holy of Holies? Just the high priest. Only the high priest. And do you know what day of the year he got to go into the Holy of Holies on? Yom Kippur. And there was where the high priest, who was in charge, spiritually in charge, of the spirit of that nation, where he made amends, where he asked for forgiveness, and he asked to be freed of all those encumbrances he hadn't let go of, so that he could lead the people in the new year. Guess what? Where is your Holy of Holies? Guess who's in here besides you? Just you and God. I'm not in there. Wanda's not in there. Your spouse is not in there. Your best friend's not in there. Just you. and the Spirit of God. That's where we make amends, in that Holy of Holies. And this is a very propitious time to do it. Can you do it any time of year? Of course you can. But if you think about it in terms of energy, for over 2,000 years, the time of Yeshua, because they did this then too, and back to the time of Moses, for now over 3,000 years, and probably before that, but we don't know about it, for at least 3,000 years, millions of souls in this time of year have the energy moving of coming back to God through forgiveness. What was the mission of Yeshua and Jesus in the first chapter of Mark? Preaching a reconciliation with God through forgiveness. That's what their missions are stated as being. This time of year, right now, millions of living souls on this planet are working toward forgiving each other and asking to be forgiven. Millions of them. There's a huge momentum. So if you want a little extra boost in the stuff you're struggling with, now's a great time to do it. So I'd like you to just take a little quiet time with me. And I'm going to do this little tune as our meditation together. You're welcome to listen to the words. You're also welcome to just be in your own holy space here. So. Hear us, God, as we call on you. Hear us, God. We would learn to follow you. All our ways are winding to a close. All our wisdom has not yet disclosed a way to peace. Hear us, God, as we call on you. Hear us, God. We would learn to build with you. All our power has not set us free. All our vision, yet we've still not seen. The answer is thee. So hear us, God, as we place our faith in you. All our lives there's so much we conceal. Let the love within us be revealed. as we sing for you. Hear us, God. We can hear you singing too. Hear us, God. Hear us, God. Hear This is a time of reconciliation and restoration. It is a time to lay aside all the pride, all the self-importance, all the comparisons, and just humbly ask to be forgiven for all the mistakes we've made, for the things entrusted to us. For all the people that we treated as less than important. For believing that we ourselves did not matter. It is a time of offering forgiveness to all those who have been obstacles on our journey, all those who have tried to bring us down, all those who have tried to clip our wings so that we can no longer fly. It is time to take to the air and be free. For I have not given you a spirit of fear, but a spirit of freedom. Let us open the door to that freedom by opening our hearts to forgiving one another. This we all pray in your name. Amen. Thank you all.